Hello, and welcome to Discovering Lenses. I'm your host, Jacob Spiekemeyer. With all of the digital editing technologies around today, it is easy to create amazing-looking videos and pictures in the editing room. But why spend all your time in the editing room if you can capture what you want the first time, with the camera itself? Today we are going to look at some ways to capture your desired image by using different types of lenses. By the end of this documentary, you should be able to choose the right type of lens for both the subject and action of your shot. Even though we will be working mostly with still photography, the same concepts can be applied to cinematography. Before we begin to talk about how to use lenses, we need to define a few basic terms. First of all, what is a lens? A lens is a piece of transparent material, usually glass, which is used for the capturing and the focusing of an image via light. Often in photography, several types of lenses are used together to create different effects. These various types of lenses are defined by their focal length. But what is a focal length? A focal length is the distance between the focal point and the camera's film stock, or digital sensor, and is measured in millimeters. The focal point is the point between the lens and the film stock at which the light rays converge into a clearly defined image. The film stock, or digital sensor, is where the image is recorded. To illustrate this better, let's take a look at this diagram. The black box in the upper left-hand corner represents the inside of the camera body's lens housing, and the red line inside the box represents the film stock. The yellow line represents the viewing angle, and the light blue line represents the lens that will determine the focal length. The white point between the red and blue line and the lens housing is a focal point. Watch what happens when the focal length changes. Notice how the viewing angle is wider when the focal length is smaller. Also notice that when the focal length decreases, the amount of environment increases. There is an easy rule of thumb to help you remember how the focal length affects the appearance of the image. The rule of thumb is this: the larger the focal length number in millimeters, the closer the object will appear in the viewfinder. Keep in mind that the camera distance, the amount of space between the camera and the subject, does not change. Now that we have defined a few basic terms, we are ready to look at specific lens types. The first type of lens we are going to look at is referred to as a normal lens. Cinematographers most frequently use this type of lens because it makes the subject look as a natural eye would see it. A normal lens has a focal length of somewhere between 35 and 70 millimeters. The biggest advantage to using a normal lens is its ability to capture a variety of shots in different settings. This picture was taken with a focal length of 45 millimeters. This image is similar to what the eye would see if you were standing outside. Here's another set of photos to show you how versatile the range of a normal lens focal length is. I took some pictures of a tree at a set distance of about 12 feet. Using a normal lens, I was able to capture 3 different shots without changing the camera's distance. A wide shot at 35 millimeters, a medium shot at 55 millimeters, and a close-up at 70 millimeters. Notice that I kept the camera bodies the same distance from the object, but I was able to capture a variety of shots without changing lenses. Another advantage to being able to capture a variety of shots with the normal lens is that the camera operators can be close to the action without endangering themselves or moving their equipment. But when a cinematographer can't get close to the action because it's too dangerous or too far away, cinematographers will use a telephoto lens. A telephoto lens has a longer body and a larger focal length than our normal lens. Remember that the larger the focal length numbers, the closer the object will appear in the viewfinder. The focal length of a telephoto lens is anywhere between 70 millimeters and 300 plus millimeters. Here's our snapshot of the farm with a focal length of 45 millimeters. Here's the same subject taken with a focal length of 75 millimeters. As you can see, less of the original image is seen. Here's an even closer shot of the farm at a focal length of 100 millimeters. Telephoto lenses are useful for taking pictures of wildlife or when a larger environment is more important to the narrative. The telephoto lens can do this because it has a larger focal length. The larger focal length allows the cinematographer to capture more of the image or action without physically getting closer, having to move a lot of equipment around, or disturbing the subject. One disadvantage to using a telephoto lens is its size. Because it is big, it requires steady hands to operate. Let me show you what I mean. I set up this shot a little earlier of a plant sitting on the table. Take a look as I pan the camera back and forth. When the focal length is small, the movement is smooth. When I change to a larger focal length and pan again, the movement becomes more noticeable. Whether you're using a tripod or holding the camera, the larger the focal length, the more noticeable the movement will be. Now that we've seen what happens when we zoom in, let's zoom out and take a look at a wide-angle lens. Wide-angle lenses have a smaller focal length. As we saw earlier, a smaller focal length will have a wider viewing angle. The focal length of a wide-angle lens is somewhere between 18 millimeters and 35 millimeters. Any focal length smaller than 18 millimeters could be considered an extreme wide-angle lens or a fisheye lens. Remember our farm picture from before? Here's what the farm looks like now at 18 millimeters. Notice how much more the image we see at 18 millimeters than 45 millimeters. Wide-angle lenses are good for filming buildings and landscapes and shooting in tight spaces. One of the disadvantages of a wide-angle lens can be its small focal length. Because it has such a wide viewing angle, pictures can become distorted. Let me show you what I mean. It's hard to see on this farm picture, so here's another image taken at 18 millimeters. Notice how the column in the highlighted part of the frame looks like it is bending to the right. Wow, that was a lot of information to take in. Let's take a moment to review visually what we learned. Watch as I mark the focal lengths of each lens with colored lines. The first picture was shot with a focal length of 18 millimeters. Here's 45 millimeters. The picture in the bottom left-hand part of the frame shows what the picture would look like in the viewfinder of the camera at each focal length. 60 millimeters, 75 millimeters, and 100 millimeters. As we wrap up, let's review what we learned today with the quiz. Today we learned that each lens is good at taking certain types of shots. Which lens would you use for shooting all three of these shots? A close-up, a medium, and a wide shot. A normal lens. A normal lens can be used to film a variety of shots. What's the rule of thumb when working with focal length? The larger the focal length, the closer the image will appear. Which lens is good for taking pictures of buildings and landscapes? Why? A wide-angle lens. A wide-angle lens has a smaller focal length, allowing a larger amount of the environment to be seen. Even though there are many powerful editing programs available today, I have taught you that you don't need to rely on them to take great pictures. I hope that by understanding how lenses work, taking pictures will become easier and more enjoyable for you. With that being said, go grab a camera and discover lenses for yourself.